Hey, this is Coach Skip Fundy. I'm back at it once again, y'all. Dropping this knowledge for you and for yours. And in this subject right here, we talking about whiteness and white nationalism. And people get complaining about white nationalism. Well, Trump's a white nationalist and all type of stuff like that. The country was founded in white nationalism. I don't get what you're trying to say. It always been that, and the country been this before. It never really changed. And the whiteness that went along with it because it let other people come along, other white groups come along with them. Now, if you read the Declaration, not the Declaration, the U.S. Constitution, they talk about Rhode Island and the plantations. Now, many people don't know that. I'm looking right here on the rhodeisland.gov. This is a rhodeisland.gov site from the state of Rhode Island. The smallest state in the Union, Rhode Island, also has the longest official name of any states. The state of Rhode Island and the Providence Plantations. So it was plantations there. Who was running these plantations? You know what I'm saying? In the state of Rhode Island. It also says in that declaration, but like I said before, in the U.S. Constitutions, these were the last. Rhode Island was the last group to sign the Declaration of Independence because it felt like they didn't have this group of whiteness. Like I said before, we're dealing with white nationalism. Feel like they had a different religion from the other groups of whites. You understand what I'm trying to say? So they didn't sign it until, as we're gonna find out later on. Now back during colonial times, Rhode Island was a slave state. It was one of the biggest slave states and a big shipping industry. There were a whole lot of shipping merchants. That's not really discussed or talked about. One of the leading, and we're going to read from this article right here, and don't forget the Guinea Voyage, the slave trader Aaron Lopez of Newport, Rhode Island. You know what I'm saying? Because he was one of the leading founders of it. We're going to find a lot about Aaron Lopez in this situation and the plantations of Rhode Island. November 2nd, 1761, the two owners began to prepare their vehicle for the second voyage, this time to Africa, obtaining flour from Philadelphia, beef from New York, and the indispensable rum, amount of 15,281 gallons from local distilleries. Additional cargo included 4 hogsheads and 1,750 pounds of tobacco, in violation of the law that required that tobacco be shipped only to Britain or other British colonies. So they bootlegging too. They sending them rum and they sending them tobacco. You know what I'm saying? So they doing criminal activities. The captain was William Peckenham, a man who had carried out at least 2 slaving voyages before this one, in 1752 and 1756. A slaving captain was not hard to find in Newport, but such slavers had been sent from the port for more than half a century by such owners as Abraham Redwood, Jonathan Bannister, Samuel and William Vernon, and even the Quaker wontons. So the Quakers, another different religious group, who had their own state, and their own state was called Pennsylvania. You feel me? This one, we're just looking at Rhode Island right now, but they was in the slave trade too. Piccaninny was near Albemarle on the Gold Coast in the spring, and by May 1st, 1762, had a load of 50 slaves. On January 7th, 1763, he reached Charleston, South Carolina, where he delivered a cargo of 134 slaves to Lopez agents Casa and Farr. Lopez presumably realized the popular adventure for the following by the series of 6 slaving voyages in the years of 1764 through 1768. Sloop Spree, Captain William Pickenham, they went to Barbados in New York and returned with the voyage sold slaves. The brig Africa, right? Pay attention to these ships too. Captain Abraham All, and then who sold slaves at Kingston. The sloop Betsy, Captain Nathaniel Briggs, 1766, sold slaves at Kingston. Brig Sally, the old Spree re-registered, right? So Sally is just the Spree right here, the first ship re-rigged. Captain Nathan Briggs, and they sold slaves in St. Kitts. The brig Africa, Captain Abraham All, sold slaves at Kingston. Brig Hannah sold slaves in South Carolina and Barbados. So the Slave voyages boosted him up. The rum composed of the boat was an outward bound cargo, varying from 50% of the value of the cargo on Africa's second voyage to 75% of that of Hana's. No dry goods are listed in the invoice of the first three voyages, but the English and India dry goods and the ready-made ruffled shirts appeared in the last three, making up 21% of the value of Sally's cargo. The vessels were small by Liverpool standards, but one must take with a grain of salt the registering tonnage for 25 of Africa and Spray and 15 for the Bessie recorded in the Jamaica Naval Office list. A brig brought by Lopez in 1768 that can be identified with some assurance as Hannah by estimating carrying a capacity of 125 to 130 tons. The records of slaves sold in America survived 5 of these voyages. The number ranges from 40 to 69 per vessel, and the average is of 55. The total Sally voyage was probably considered lower than the average. Captain Briggs had taken aboard 21 slaves in the Windward Coast, Cape south of the Cape Verde, and 10 at Cape Mount on the Grand Coast, and 67 along the Gold Coast for a total of 98. However, Lopez informed his London correspondent, William Steed, that there was severe loss of life at sea and much sickness among the survivors, first the hurried sail at St. Kitts. Sally's law recorded the burial of 6 slaves at sea, dead with the fever or flux, and the loss was doubtless much heavier, as the loss did not recover for a 4-month period of coasting southward and eastward on the Windward Coast of Cape Casson on. The reason why I showed this about the slave ships and stuff like that, because like the plantation of Rhode Island, which is the official name of the state, and the Providence Plantations, and how they were shipping merchants and slave merchants. Because when we see this, when it comes to the Revolutionary War, as we're about to show right here, the slaves, these merchants became the fathers of the American Navy. This piece right here is from the Jewish American Council about Jewish history and stuff like that, pre-colonial history. You know what I'm saying? Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation. How the Jews saved the American Revolution. All right, I'm going to start from right about here. The war was not going well at first for the young American army. Though facing hard times and even defeat, Jews stood and fought alongside with their neighbors. Into the terrible dark cold winter at Valley Forge, Abraham Levy and Philip Russell stood their watch. Joseph Simon, from his frontier forge at Lancaster, Pennsylvania, supplied the army with famous Henry rifles. So, as you see right now, Joseph Simon, like I said before, he's supplying the U.S. Army with rifles. You know, that was their job. They was like the middleman, the financiers, and things of that nature. As we're about to see right here. Jewish trading merchants, peaceful before the war. Now, I showed you what the peaceful stuff they was doing. They was doing slave ships. You understand? They was packing them up from Rhode Island, doing slave ships and selling rum and tobacco, bootlegging. Outfitted their ships to become privateers and ravaged the British at sea. So they changed their ships over to gunships to fight the British at sea, being the founders of the American Navy. Feel me? So that's how they got down. They would, you know what I'm saying? Some pages will show that Aaron Lopez is the founder of the American Navy. Privateers, meaning, I want to explain this part too about privateers. You know what I'm saying? The privateer part right here, meaning that America wasn't a nation yet. You know what I'm saying? So since they didn't have no nation, it wasn't a standing nation yet. It was just basically a broke-away colony. They were privateers. The same thing happened to the Confederacy. Lincoln called them pirates. He didn't call them. That's why it's kind of hard to get kind of data on the Confederate Navy. You feel me? He didn't call them the Confederate Navy. He called them pirates. That made them more expendable because they was a land. They didn't have no land. You know what I'm saying? They were just sea dogs. They didn't have no land. All right. They become privateers and ravaged the British at sea. The cost to many was great. The great merchant traders of Newport, Rhode Island, saw their fortunes lost. Such men as Aaron Lopez went bankrupt supporting the revolution when their ships were lost to the British. In the area of finance, the young American government might have floundered too. except for the financial genius and the personal financial risk and support taken by Jaime Solomon. Solomon was to die bankrupt by a total support of the American cause. Though a smaller number, the Jews choose to cast their fate with the Americans. So this guy right here, Jaime Solomon, was basically boosting up the American government through financial support. You know what I'm saying? All of them came from Rhode Island. You feel me? And if you still don't believe that Rhode Island was like that, a plantation, which is in its name, it's still in an official name, the smallest state of the Union. Rhode Island has the longest official name in any state. The state of Rhode Island and the Providence Plantations. And if you still don't believe they have plantations, well, let's go to this historical fact. This historical fact on this one is the 1st Rhode Island Regiment of the Continental Army. The 1st Rhode Island Regiment was known as the Black Regiment due to its allowing a recruitment of blacks, African Americans, in 1778. This decision was designed to help fill the dwindling ranks among the Rhode Island regiments, and regarded had produced the first African American military regiment. All right. Now, the reason why, because these rich merchants, they wasn't going to fight for that. They was already financing, the war. They supplied the Navy. They wasn't going to supply their body like that. You feel me? For the cause, which So they said, take these slaves, basically. Let's see. Take these black folks and have them fight on our behalf. In January 1778, Rhode Island was having difficulty meeting troop quotas set by the Continental Congress. Pursued a suggestion made by General James Vernon, who had commanded the 1st Rhode Island from the onset of the war. Vernon urged General George Washington to enlist slaves in the Continental Army. Vernon argued that the regiment of African Americans could easily be raised in Rhode Island, it was a plantation state. It could be easily raised in Rhode Island because it was a plantation state, which prompted Washington to pass along his recommendation to Nicholas Cook, the governor of Rhode Island. On February 14, 1778, the Rhode Island Assembly voted to allow every able-bodied Negro, mulatto, and or Indian man slave in this state to enlist either to the Continental Battalion being raised. The Assembly further stipulated that every slave so enlisting upon his pass the muster before Colonel Christopher Green be immediately discharged from service of his master or mistress and be absolutely free. The key word in the sentence was further stipulated. All right, key word in the sentence, because we got to find out what happened to these in later video. What happened to these gentlemen that fought? Rhode Island slave owners opposed to the new law, fearing that the consequences of armed slaves on those still in bondage. Their opposition prevailed, and in June, the Rhode Island Assembly repealed this law. In that 4-year period, however, over 100 free and formerly enslaved African Americans enlisted. If you do a study on the American Revolutionary War in the northeastern part of the country, a British general wrote in his letter, I can't think of the British general name off rip, but he said, we're not fighting against some, the Americans, we fighting against Ethiopia. And this is who they was fighting against. You know what I'm going to say? This is the man they was fighting against, because more people eventually came on. After the repeal, the Rhode Island Treasury recorded another 44 slaves who enlisted, eventually running around 225 men, 140 whom were African Americans. So they talk about what we're fighting against Ethiopia, the British are talking about, because they came from Rhode Island, they didn't want to put them out there like that. They want to fight themselves, so they put their slaves out there. And then got word because their slaves knew how to use guns and stuff like that, so they had to rescind the bill, and they still kept coming up short. But just in case you still don't want to believe, you know what I'm saying? And we're dealing with whiteness and white nationalism. I showed you the Quaker, he was down. You know what I'm saying? They showed a little line about the Quaker, they was down. And I'm showing you who got their own state. And their own state was called Pennsylvania. You feel me? This was the Jewish state right here, Rhode Island. You know what I'm saying? George Washington, he wrote a letter to the Jewish community thanking them for their support because they was dead in the ass on that one. They didn't have the money, in order to really have the resources in the shipbuilding and stuff like that because the Jewish merchants ran the slave trade. So We're going to take a little piece out of this right quick. You know what I'm saying? That's what they got to say about it.
Also set up a different hierarchy, or hint at setting up a different hierarchy with American as the overarching category and religious identity.
As you see right here, it says George Washington wrote a letter to the Jewish community of Newport, Rhode Island in about 1790 about the importance of religious freedom. This is the reason why, if you look in the history books, Rhode Island was the last one to sign a Declaration of Independence, because they wanted to make sure their religious freedoms, them being Jews, their religious freedoms was intact in that situation. You know what I'm saying? For all the stuff they done did. All right, that's just a sidebar to cut. Let's get back to it.
Subordinate to that. And doesn't that have an impact on the way in which going forward Jewish communities will see themselves? I mean, originally they came here organized among their own communities as they had been in Europe, with a need to appoint someone who would represent them to what they considered to be the host government. That was no longer necessary. I mean, doesn't this really hint at an assimilation that is that's about to
Well, I think you're absolutely right in pointing out that at this time, Jews begin to view themselves differently, and we can see that because they stop referring to themselves as the Jewish nation. Colonial documents and Caribbean documents very frequently refer to the idea of the Jewish nation. Jews, when they came from Portugal, sometimes called themselves the Portuguese nation, but that, of course, was a metaphor, a synonym for Jewish. And now the word nation is dropped because...
I hear that? Also, that's another thing you got to look out for, too, in the history books. When you come to the New World and you see Portugal or Portuguese, that was a cover for, you know, Jewish explorers and shit. You know, gotta pay attention to things like that. He's saying it right here.
You can't be a separate nation. We want to be part of the American nation. After the revolution, we're engaged in nation building. Jews look for other ways for describing themselves, whether it's children of the stock of Abraham, which of course does not take off, but society is a word that they use. Later they're going to use the word race. Later they're going to use the word ethnic group. But there is a search for a term that will be acceptable within the American setting, even as Jews are part of the American nation, something that they could not hope to be in many other countries where they lived. They were, in fact, a state within a state. Now that we have a modern world with an American nation and nation building, Jews very much want to be part of that nation. Of course, in Europe, you are going to require Jews in many ways to speak of their loyalty to France and so on, and to drop many things, to drop elements of nationhood. It is interesting to compare the Paris Sanhedrin and the requirements made on Jews after the French Revolution with the American setting where none of that happens. No demands are made on Jews that we will only give you George Washington's letters if you agree to A, B, C, D. Nothing of the kind. Jews get it as an inherent natural right.
I think it's important.
As you said, you know, they basically assimilated into whiteness. They were still distinctively Jewish, you know what I'm saying? But they assimilated into whiteness because they didn't have to really fill the boundaries up no more, because this was their promised land, as granted by General George Washington in the letter. You know what I'm saying? So they was part of the white nationalism push that was continuing on. You know, Zionism, white nationalism is all white supremacy, hands down. And like I said in many other videos before, it don't matter what religion they are, because the Quakers was a part of this too. You know, the Presbyterians, whatever you want to pick out, they were part of this too. All you had to be was a white male, basically, and be down, have some money, some type of property. And usually that property ownership throughout the 13 colonies was owning a slave. Anyway, this is a Coast Gift Fun Day, just dropping this knowledge down here, you know what I'm saying? But y'all don't believe me, look it up and put these references in here, you know, so y'all can look it up yourselves, you feel me? No, the official name of the state of Rhode Island is Rhode Island, and the Protestant Plantations, the Providence Plantations. You know what I'm saying? It says it in the Declaration of Independence, it says it still today. It tells you who was running the state. When you look back then, who was really running the state. Even the Jewish sources I showed admit to it, and how they was dealing in the slave trade. And if you still don't believe that was a plantation state, just look at the first Rhode Island Regiment and how they had to fight. We're gonna find out what happened to the people that Rhode Island Regiment, because maybe some got freed, maybe some went back into slavery. It was stipulated, so it was just a gamble. Anywho, this is a Coast Gift Fun Day, man. You hit the like button, subscribe, you know what I'm saying? Drop something down in the comments, you know, do what you please. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed and learned something. Peace.